For the 2025 upcoming season, some Detroit Lions fans are actively wondering how the team is actually going to do. But in today's episode, I'm going to talk about how they're going to surprise not just those Lions fans, but the rest of the NFL. So stay tuned. We're going to talk about it.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10, 5, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So folks, here's the thing. I know that this entire offseason has definitely been one where many Lions fans, at least the ones that I've talked to anyway, have openly and have actively wondered what exactly the Lions are going to do. And what do I mean by that? I'm saying, and I'm, referring to the fact that there are Lions fans that are actively wondering, they're actively thinking about what we can realistically expect from the Detroit Lions in the 2025 season. Can we expect 11-game win season? Can we expect a 12-game win season? What exactly can we expect? And you know what? That's all fair. That's all fine. That's all grand and glorious. But I'm going to tell you right now, it is my honest and sincere belief that the Lions are actually going to surprise a lot of people, and it's going to be an unbelievable surprise. Now, why do I say that? Why do I think that? What exactly gives me the interpretation that that's what we can expect? The reason why I feel that way is because, contrary to what some people think, I believe that the Lions, again, you have to consider the fact that for a long time this offseason, everybody has considered that either the Lions are just standing pat or they've actually taken a step backwards. For me, I do not think that's the case. I think that the Lions, if you actually think about it from where they, stopped at 2024 to now, I actually think that the Lions have taken a step forward. Now, I know for some people, they're going to be like, dude, I don't care how you try to spin this. There's no way the Lions have taken a step forward. Okay, that's fair. I can understand why you may think that. But that's only if you're taking a look and just solely factoring in, okay, who have we brought in as far as talent is concerned? But if you actually step back and you actually take a look at the broader picture and you actually see what is going on here and what the Lions have set up and are getting ready to set up, the Lions are in a much better opportunity to make a step forward in terms of their team's power threshold than they were in 2024. I'm not necessarily saying they're going to win more games. They probably are going to win, in my honest opinion, probably about 12 to 13 games this year. So in terms of a record, it might take a step back. But in terms of how they win games and who they win against, I believe that they're taking a step forward and they're going to surprise the NFL in 2025 by showcasing their unbelievable power in a way that we have not seen them do it before. And I've got several reasons for this. So this episode is actually going to be a rather in-depth one. So hang on to your hats because we're going to be going at it here for a while. So, When we talk about the Detroit Lions for the upcoming 2025 season, the first thing I want to talk about here is I want to talk about the offense. But the offense, I'm going to talk about it in a very large, grandiose scale. But I'm not going to spend as much time on it as you might think. When we take a look at the offense, obviously we know in 2024 the offense was the best in the NFL. There's no debate about this. And there's obvious reasons as to why it was the best. Now, if you want to try and justify, if you want to try and argue that that's all because of Ben Johnson, again, that's fine. But I would wholeheartedly disagree with you. First and foremost, while Ben Johnson was the play caller, he was not the guy that actually ran the plays. And oftentimes, as we already know, Jared Goff, who was the quarterback on the field, would change those plays by checking or killing out of them. Again, you go back to what Goff did in 2024. He had the second highest passing completion percentage, the second most passing yards, the second highest pass average per throw, the fourth most passing touchdowns, the third highest pass touchdown percentage per throw, the second best passer rating, and the sixth best QBR. I don't care what damn coaching you have. In order for a quarterback to post those kinds of numbers, the quarterback has got to do a lot of things right, both pre, during, and post-snap. So for me, to try and say that, Ben Johnson was the reason for all of the Lions' success on offense is just mere folly. And especially when you consider the fact that Goff is not the only reason why this offense does what it does and how it does it. The other main component to how this offense works is the rushing attack. Again, you go back to last year. In 2024, being primarily between Sonic and Knuckles, obviously there are other factors in there, but primarily those two guys, the Lions finished third in total rushes, sixth in rushing yards. They were tied sixth in rush average per, run. They had the second most rushing touchdowns, tied with someone else. They had the second highest touchdown rush percentage per rush. And they had the fourth most rushing for first downs. Again, you're talking about a rushing attack that is primarily a top 5, almost top 3 attack. And then once you get more specific to that rushing attack and you just primarily take a look at what Gibbs did, Gibbs primarily was the rushing attack for us last year. And dude, his numbers last year are just an absolute thing of beauty. Even though he was only tied 11th for rushing attempts, he had the 5th most rushing yards, he had the 5th highest rush average, he was tied first for most rushing touchdowns, he had the second highest rush touchdown percentage, and he had the 7th most rushing first downs as a running back. Again, even though he was only ranked 11th and tied with somebody else for most rush attempts. But yet everything else, top 10, top 5 across the board. Now, when you factor in this team's ability to run the ball, as well as Jared Goff's prolific 2024 season as an overall outlook, you then take a look at what Goff was able to do off of play action, because play action is a huge component of this offense. And in play action, Goff last year was second best in completion percentage. He was the number 1 passer off of play action in terms of yards, tied second in pass average per throw, tied second in passing touchdowns, ranked 4th in passing touchdown percentage per throw, ranked 3rd in passer rating, and ranked 1st in first downs off of play action. So just from the passing element and the rushing element, which makes up also the play action element, this offense is very, very well capable of handling just about anybody. But there are a couple of other things that this offense, I believe, is going to showcase a similarity to times past. Now, I know I could talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown. I know I could talk about JMO, I could talk about Sam Laporta, but in fact, what I'm actually going to do here is I'm actually going to talk about Tim Patrick for a brief moment. Because let's understand something here. We already know Sam Laporta is a top 5 tight end. We already know Amon-Ra St. Brown is a top 5 wide receiver. We already know that Jameson Williams is one of the best, if not the best, deep ball threat in the NFL. But Tim Patrick is an interesting case study if you actually realize and you remember why he was brought in. Tim Patrick was brought in to be a replacement for Josh Reynolds. Well, when you take a look at what Tim Patrick did last year, even though I think he only started, I think it was 9 games or something like that, he had 33 catches off of 44 targets, which was a 75% reception rate. His previous high, by the way, was 64.6%. He had 11.9 in average a catch, 3 receiving touchdowns, 20 first down catches, which means that he had a 61% first down percentage per catch. Now, why is that important? The reason that it's important is because, again, when you take a look at what the Lions did with Tim Patrick, first and foremost, he was coming off of 2 straight years where he had back-to-back season-ending injuries. And he was able to come back and have a very, very strong season for what we were looking for. But we didn't officially integrate him as far as being a part of the offense until about week 4 or so. So from the Seattle game onward, if you go back and you check his game logs, he makes a visible difference in how this Lions offense functions. Now, why I'm talking about Tim Patrick is because if you remember those first couple of games of 2024, there was clearly something wrong with our offense. And the reason I believe, and I even said it back then, is because we didn't truly have a number 3 wide receiver that could replace what Josh Reynolds was doing. And I even said it, I was like, listen, Josh Reynolds might not have put up the biggest numbers, but he was an integral, critical part of this offense. Which now brings me to why I'm talking about Tim Patrick. Now that he's had a full year in the system, he is back, he is fully integrated into the offense, and he's now built a rapport and chemistry with Jared Goff. I fully expect that his numbers are going to probably be a lot closer to what Josh Reynolds put up in 2023 than what he did last year. Because again, it takes time to build rapport and chemistry. It takes time to get used to an offense. Well, now he's coming back after being here last year. That's no longer a concern. So long as he stays healthy, which he showed he could do last year, he's going to be fine, which is going to make our offense, again, even more powerful. Then we have to take a look at the coaching element to this offense, which pretty much comes down to 3 caballeros. The first being John Morton, the second being David Shaw, the third being Tashard Choice. I fully believe 100% that this trio is going to make the Lions offense one that's going to rival the 2013 Broncos. I fully believe that. And I'll tell you why. First and foremost, you have John Morton. I've talked about him extensively. But just to give a brief career cap, even though he's only been an offense coordinator one other time in the NFL up to this point, you go back to that year he was with the Jets. Yes, the Jets did not do well offensively compared to the rest of the league. But when you take a look at what John Morton had to work with in that offense, he gave a lot of guys that were on that offense their best career seasons, particularly Josh McCown. I think Josh McCown that year finished with like almost 2,600 yards, and it was his best season as a starter in the NFL, which we all remember that Josh McCown was in essence a career backup. And then you take a look at what John Morton has been doing the entire time he's been in the NFL. He's worked under, learned from, and been mentored by guys like, Sean Payton, Jim Harbaugh, and freaking John Gruden. The guy has got an extensive wealth of knowledge when it comes to NFL offenses. So then, after talking about Morton, you flip to David Shaw. Shaw has been considered long one of the most innovative thinkers in the NFL alongside Morton. I mean, this is the guy that was responsible primarily for Andrew Luck's development when he was at Stanford in college. And this guy was also mentored by NFL legend Bill Walsh while he was at Stanford as well as a player and then as a coach. I'm telling you, David Shaw is a clear upgrade over our previous passing game coordinator, which was Tanner and Strain. And I believe he's going to take this offensive passing attack with Jared Goff to the next level. Which then brings us to the running backs coach, Tashard Choice. Now, I'm going to tell you this right now. This is one coaching duo with his players that I can't wait to see. Because Choice is going to get reunited with Gibbs from when they were back at Georgia Tech. And he's also going to get a chance to work with Monty. Those two already on their own are the best running back duo tandem in the NFL. But Choice is going to make them even more deadly to opposing defenses. I mean, everyone has considered him the best running backs coach in all of football. So I'm going to tell you this right now. I expected it last year, but because of Monty getting injured, that kind of got screwed. But I'm telling you this year. I expect that both running backs are going to have 1,000 yards rushing. Now, I know when I say that and everything else that I've talked about with the offense, there are some that are worried about our offensive line in regard to the guards. Because obviously losing Kevin Zeitler, that definitely hurts. But I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm not worried about it, and I'll tell you why. I know for some people, they're going to be like, oh, well, we need to replace Glasgow. We need to replace Glasgow. He's too old. He didn't have a good season last year, blah, 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 blah. Okay, again, that's fine. But let's understand something here. Players sometimes have bad seasons. It happens. They also have what are known as rebound seasons or bounce back seasons. I'm telling you this right now. If Glasgow was to hit the free agency market today, he would have no trouble finding suitors. He's still considered one of the better guards in the NFL. And I expect he'll bounce back in 2025. Whether or not you do, that's entirely up to you. But I believe Glasgow will be fine. However, though, that brings us to the other situation with Christian Mahogany, who's going to be replacing Zeitler. Now, I know some have expressed some trepidation at him filling in his massive shoes. But I'm going to tell you this right now. I expect and I believe that Mahogany is actually going to do rather well filling in for Zeitler. And I'll show you why. If you take a look at PFF and you take a look at how Kevin Zeitler did last year in overall blocking, pass blocking, and run blocking, and then you compare that to Christian Mahogany, you're going to get a rather interesting surprise. Kevin Zeitler last year in overall blocking was an 86.5, in pass he was an 87.2, and in run he was a 70.7. Would it actually surprise you to know that Christian Mahogany across the board in those exact same three categories was an 81.6, an 80.8, and an 82.6? So wait a minute here. Pretty much Mahogany across the board was in a very similar ballpark in terms of his PFF grading as Kevin Zeitler was. Now that's impressive for a couple of reasons. One, Kevin Zeitler's going into his 14th year as an NFL vet, which means he was in year 13 when he was with the Lions. What was Mahogany last year? Oh, that's right. He was a rookie. So I understand that some people are going to say, well, David, that's not really fair because Mahogany only had about 100 snaps or something compared to Zeitler, who had closer to 600. Okay, I grant you that. It is a significantly smaller sample size. But for a rookie to come in and to perform even that well with such a small sample size, it shows the immense upside that Mahogany has, and it's why I believe Holmes and Campbell believe that he's more than able to fill in for Zeitler's spot. So, lots of information there on the offense, and why I believe the offense is even going to be better than what it was in 2025. But I know some people are going to say, well, David, we don't give a hoot and hanny about the offense. We know that's going to be fine. We're more concerned with the defense. Okay, that's fine. We're also going to talk about that. I know there are some who are worried about the defense, and one of the things they're worried about is the fact about whether or not Hutch is going to return to the same player that he was prior to the injury he sustained in Dallas last year. I'm just going to say this right off the bat. I believe 100% that Hutch is going to be fine. I truly believe that, and I'll tell you why. Remember, Hutch broke bones. He did not tear ligaments. He did not tear tendons, muscles, or anything like that. In fact, the doctors even themselves said, listen, for the type of injury that he had he was actually very fortunate with how that injury went, because all he did was break bones. There was no structural damage to any of his ligaments, muscles, or anything else. So in essence, what, freaking Hutch had was a really nasty bone break. Didn't have any compound fractures, didn't have anything of super serious. It was just, okay, this is a really bad break. So why is that important here? Well, the reason it's important is because, as everyone knows, when you break a bone, it heals. Well, the bone comes back stronger where the break occurred because the bone gets thicker and denser. So the reason why that's important is because bones breaking have absolutely nothing to do with affecting Hutch's speed, explosiveness, or bend off the edge. That has everything to do with his muscles. That has everything to do with his ability for himself to bend, contort, which is all about ligaments, all about your ability to get into certain places. That has absolutely nothing to do with bone structure. Now, I will say this, because some of you are going to say, well, David, he could still be feeling, some trepidation about the injury. Okay, that's fair. I mean, the only thing that could hold Hutch back is if he's afraid of getting another injury. But let's understand something we know about Hutch here. The guy's fearless. And in order to be an edge rusher, you have to be fearless. Because when you're coming around that edge as fast as you are, you literally have to be fearless about the fact that, hey, I'm probably going to hit somebody. It's probably going to hurt a little bit. So it's like you already know what you're signing up for. Hutch is fearless. I have no doubt in my mind he'll return just as good. In fact, I think he's going to come back stronger, because Hutch has also been relentless in attacking his rehab. So I'm confident he's going to be better in 2025, not worse. And that's going to be huge for the Lions defense, especially the secondary, which when we talk about the secondary, it's going to be better in 2025 based upon 3 simple reasons. Number 1, we have DJ Reed over Carlton Davis. Number 2, we have more depth and rotation. Number 3, Terrion Arnold is going to be a hell of a lot better in 2025. Again, I'll go over those reasons really quickly here, but I'm not going to spend too much time on the first 2. When it comes to DJ Reed, I don't know how else to say this, but I've already talked about it before. DJ Reed was on a team with a worse defense and on a team with a worse offense in comparison to Carlton Davis last year, but yet he put up pretty much the exact same statistics as Carlton Davis. He was on the field more on defense, and his offense couldn't keep them off the field, but yet he still put up the same basic numbers. But the thing that Reed is better at in terms of Davis is, 1, he has a better cultural identity to this team. He has a better mindset as far as how to attack. And on top of that, just his physicality is a much better fit than what Carlton Davis's was. Like, he is, I've said it before, I'll say it again. He just fits exactly what the Detroit Lions are all about right now. His physicality, I guarantee you, is going to add more to this defense being the type that it has been in the past. That's just the type of player that he is. His aggressiveness is just absolutely a fit for what this Lions defense is going to do. Now, when it comes to the rotation and depth, as I already stated earlier today, the Lions last night, they signed Rock Ya-Sin and they re-signed Khalil Dorsey. Both of those signings are exactly what I said Holmes was setting up to do, making preliminary moves to get to his ultimate grand finale. But as I also stated, what Holmes is trying to do is he's trying to continue to add depth and rotation to keep, injuries from being a concern. Well, when you sign 2 guys like that, you're adding more depth and rotation to your cornerback room because, wait a minute here, the cornerback room, just like the wide receiver room, just like the running back room, is a room that can typically get hit with injuries pretty hard. So now, rather than having to worry about potentially trying to find guys, Brad Holmes has made sure that, hey, we brought back a guy we liked in Dorsey, but we also went out and we got a guy that's got some experience in Rock Ya-Sin. My whole point is this, as I said earlier today and as I said yesterday, the point of the matter is what Brad Holmes is doing is he is making sure that there is plenty of solid depth and rotation behind the starters in case of, 1, if injury strikes again, or 2, to make sure that, hey, if guys need a breather, we have somebody that we can fill in and we're not going to feel too bad about it if they have to go in. Which then brings me to my last point about the defense. Terrion Arnold. I know this. There's a lot of people that are still kind of iffy when it comes to Terrion Arnold because, the first, half of last year, first 2/3 of last year, it was kind of a rough year for him. But let's also understand something here. He was learning the transition from the college ranks to the NFL ranks. The cornerback position is viewed as one of the hardest positions to learn how to transition from outside of quarterback and tight end. But when you take a look at how Terrion Arnold has done since the last, 6-7 games of the year, which I've talked about before, there was a clear shift in how he was able to play. The last third of the season, he started showing what the Lions saw in him when they drafted him in the first round last year. Now, why I believe he's going to take a huge step forward in 2025 is because, one, as I just stated, he was starting to show what he was doing last year. And bear in mind, towards the end of the year, that was when our defense was getting more injuries. But yet he was stepping up and making plays. But the reason I bring that up is because at the start of this year, when he's going to have all that experience under his belt, he's going to have another training camp under his belt. Oh, that's right, we're also going to have Hutch back, who I just stated not that long ago, I believe is going to be better in 2025 because of how he attacks and how relentless he is in terms of his pursuit to excellence. Then that brings me to my third reason. DJ Reed. Again, I said it before, DJ Reed, in my opinion, is just a better cornerback than Carlton Davis is. And as such, I believe he's going to mentor Terrion Arnold even more so than what Carlton Davis did, which is going to result in him being even better. And then the final reason is, I've said this before and I'll say it again here. When we get that new edge rusher from the draft, I don't know who it's going to be, but I have my suspicions. It might be, Pierce, or it might be freaking Sawyer or some other person. That is going to also help out because now you're going to have a competent edge rusher that's on a bookend opposite of Hutch. And then when you have that rotational element I just talked about, it's going to help keep the defense fresh, which is also going to help out Arnold because it's like, hey, you know what? Instead of having a guy that's tired and, sucking for wind, I'm going to have somebody that's up front that's fresh, which is going to help me in my coverage ability. So again, that's also going to help. Now, the final things I'm going to talk about here are the special teams and then the draft and free agency. When you talk about special teams, it's pretty self-explanatory. Freaking Jack Fox is the best punter in the NFL. We're getting back Dave Phipp for another year, which is consistency. That's going to also continue to help. But the real element about the special teams that we need to talk about is Jake Bates. Jake Bates is a guy that we're going to have coming into the very next season and is actually going to come in pretty much uncontested as the kicker. And the reason why is because Jake Bates in 2024 showed that, hey, he can handle it. If you go back to 2024, Bates had 3 games in which he kicked a winning walk-off field goal. The first game was against the, Vikings in the very first game of the year. It was a 44-yarder. The second game was the Houston game where he kicked a 52-yarder. And then the third game was the second game against Green Bay where he kicked a 35-yarder. What that shows right there is that at any distance, Bates can be trusted to win a do-or-die game. And this will allow Campbell, in my opinion, to be more comfortable with kicking field goals at any point during the game. And it will also be good because, hey, if you know what, it's coming close to the end of the game, rather than always feeling like the offense has to go for it, it should enable him to say, hey, you know what, I have this guy that I had last year. I trust him. He's continued to do his job. I don't always have to go for it on 4th down. But we know that Campbell does like to do that because of his aggressive mindset. So that also is going to show the Lions' unbelievable power because it's like, hey, defense is getting better, offense is getting better, and then special teams, there is actual consistency at the kicking position. Which then brings us to the draft and free agency. I've talked about the draft, I've talked about free agency quite extensively this offseason. But again, I'm going to say this with all sincerity. When it comes to the draft, I fully expect that Brad Holmes is going to draft an edge rusher in the first round. And I wouldn't at all be surprised if he decides to trade up to get the guy he really wants. And then he's going to probably use the remaining draft pieces that he has to try and plug and add more quality players around the roster. Maybe a starter here or there, it all depends, but mostly a lot of other good depth and rotational pieces. And then when it comes to the second wave of free agency, he's probably going to plug up even more holes or add even more depth. Again, the name of the game this offseason is not about how many big-time players we can get. It's about, okay, how do we maintain the status quo of what we had last year while also making sure we get better on health for the upcoming year, but at the same time we have quality and depth to make sure that if something happens, we're in a good place. That is why I think a lot of Lions fans are having problems this offseason, because they think, oh, well, in order to get better, we have to add more talent. That's partially true, but what you need to have more so is to ensure that you have quality depth and rotation behind that talent. And that's exactly what the Lions have been doing on defense, but everything else they've been doing has been adding to what they already had, especially on offense. It's like, hey, Morton's better than Johnson. Shaw is better than Strain. Tashard Choice is the best running backs coach there is. Getting back Tim Patrick and having him come back, that's huge. Having, Gibbs paired up with his old running backs coach, that's huge. Goff paired with Shaw and Morton. I mean, it just goes on and on. It literally is a domino effect that builds on top of itself. But anyway, I have talked about this very extensively. Hopefully you all have been able to get it. I do apologize for as long as this went on, so I'm going to end this episode and say thank you all for watching another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, I want to highly encourage y'all, please make sure you hit that bell notification icon so that way you never miss any more content. Also encourage y'all to share this content anywhere and everywhere you possibly can, whether it's on YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook. And with that, folks, I just want to say thank you all for watching in another episode. I truly hope that you guys got something out of it. I hope I was able to give you guys something to think about. Whether it's the first time you're watching me, you guys have been watching me forever. Also hope that everybody has something in their life that makes them happy, makes them smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.